So the purpose of this video is to throw together a quick spelling guide for English. It seems like a lot of people have trouble with it, so I thought it would be good to see if I could demystify it a little. There have been various movements to simplify the spelling of English to make it easier to learn, but since that movement's 100 years old and hasn't gained much ground, I figure the only sensible alternative left is to teach traditional spelling in a more efficient way. So I'm just going to go through the alphabet and talk about the most common spelling patterns and teach it that way. I guess a little background might be helpful. Before dictionaries and standardized spelling came around, starting around the 1700s, people pretty much just spelled things however they wanted. Which, if you ask me, is a much more sensible way to do things, but here we are. We have to use standard spellings these days. But the problem with the way the dictionaries and standardized spellings were compiled is that since the same words were spelled in different ways in different places, whichever variation was the most common, that became the standard spelling. So the problem this created is that the same combination of letters can represent more than one sound, and the same sound can be represented by more than one combination of letters. Fortunately, the good news is most of this chaos comes from the vowel sounds. The consonants are fairly regular. So without further ado, I'll move on to the spelling of the various spelling rules for the various vowels. Start with the letter A. Okay, so in most short words in English, this makes the A sound. So we have words like bad and hat. And this accounts for most of the 2, 3, and 4 letter words in English with the letter A. If it just has one A, it probably makes the A sound. And there are a couple exceptions to this rule. You have and was. So in those words, the letter A makes the sound. And there are a couple other short words where it makes the sound. These are pretty rare though. So a couple of short words where it makes the sound are ball, father, and others. So that takes care of just one A by itself. Also, I should point out that if the letter A appears by itself at the end of the word, it makes the sound as well. So you can see this in words like extra or plural. There, the last A makes the sound as well. Then we have the silent E rule. So in words like same and lake, and other words where you have one A in the middle and an E at the end, that E at the end makes the A sound like A. Another common pattern for this sound is AI, and you see in words like rain and nail. And the last combination of letters that makes the A sound for the letter A is AY. You see that in words like day and say. AW makes, in American English, it makes the sound. So we have words like law or saw and law. British people tend to pronounce these words, it sounds more like soar and lure, sort of like an or sound, but in American English it's just a straight sound. With the R sound, here another difference between US English and British English. Words like art and hard. The Americans pronounce the letter R with a very distinct sound, whereas British people tend to say something more like ot and hod. The R is barely whispered. And the last main spelling pattern with the letter A is if A precedes the letter T in a word, if you see a word with ATI like nation or patience, any word that has this ATI pattern in it, that A is usually going to sound like A. And I guess the last thing I can say is in longer words where A is at the front, like association. In longer words where A is at the front, that A almost always makes the sound. So that takes care of the main spelling patterns for the letter A. Moving on to E. New marker. So in most short words in English, the letter E sounds like eh. You can see this in words like a leg or get. Another common pattern, the only really consistent pattern would be a double E. And double E always makes the E sound in words like need, seed. The only exception to this rule would be words that come from French, like entree or fiancé. But in all Anglo-Saxon derived words, double E always sounds like E. And then we have the EA combination, which is a little tricky, but the EA combination almost always sounds like E as well. So you see this in words like meat and bean. The only exception, major exception to this rule is great, which is a regular spelling. And so most of the time EA also sounds like E. There are a couple of words where EA sounds like eh again, and those are words like bread and head. EW always sounds like oo, and you see this in words like new or do. Few it has sort of like a Y sound in the front, but most of the time EW sounds like oo. Same deal with EU. You see this in words like feud. EU usually makes the U sound, especially if it's at the front of the word like Europe or euphoria. So EU is the U, sounds like U. EY pretty much always makes the A sound. You see this in words like they or hey, way. One irregular EY spelling is I. And then another very common pattern is the EIGH. This sounds like a, so you see this in words like way and neighbor. And if I was British, I would be putting a U in there, but I'm not. And the last most common spelling pattern for E is the sound. You see this in words like her. So ER in English almost always makes the sound. There are a couple other patterns that also make and we'll get to those in a minute. So you can see that the main spelling confusion in English comes from the vowels, specifically A, E, and O. I and U tend to be pretty straightforward as far as spelling goes. So moving on to the letter I, most of the time in short words it makes the is sound. You see this in words like big and fish. An irregular spelling is I or Friday. So there are a handful of words where a sole I sounds like I. And then we have island, another irregular spelling. IE pretty much always sounds like I. So you see this in words like lie and die. The same sound is also represented with IGH, which you see in words like high or night. So the IGH pretty much always makes the I sound. And another spelling pattern that also makes the I sound is the I and then silent E. You would see this in words like and fine. So once again, like A, putting a silent E at the end changes the length of from a short vowel I to a long vowel I. And then we have the sound, can also be spelled with I, and you'd see this in words like bird. So IR for the sound is somewhat rare. Most of the time in English the sound is spelled with ER, but there are a couple words that use IR. And then last you have many names of countries have IA at the end. So for example, like Serbia. So IA at the end always sounds like IA. So Serbia, Bosnia, Russia, sometimes it sounds like just straight So it can be IA or depending on the case. So it can be IA like in Serbia or like in Russia or special. And that takes care of the letter I. I'm not going through, there are many irregular spellings in English, but I'm trying to cover the rules that cover the most basic words. And the trickiest vowel of all for spelling is the letter O, which can make a whole bunch of sounds. In most short words that end in the letter O, like no or so, ago, it sounds like O. The exceptions to this are do and to. And those are the two main exceptions to the rule that a word that ends in O, the O sounds like O. In most short words with just O, in American English it sounds pretty much like ah. So you have words like dog, log, on. British people would pronounce this short O a little differently. They would say dog, log, on. So it's a short, rounded vowel. In American English it merged with the ah sound, so we say dog, log, on. OA is pretty consistent. It always pretty much always makes the O sound. So in words like boat or goat. The only irregular example of this is boa. So that's irregular. But pretty much every Anglo-Saxon word OA sounds like O. Let's see. Like A and I, if we have a silent E, it takes a short vowel and makes it long. So you'd see this in words like bone or tone. There are a bunch of exceptions to this though. So some irregular exceptions to this rule would be words like one, some. So those are two very common exceptions to the silent E, long O rule. Double O in English usually sounds like oo. You see this in words like soon and room. There are a couple exceptions to this. There are a couple words where a double O makes the sound, and the only combination of letters that makes the sound is double O. So you see this in words like good, book, wood. Pretty much any word with an sound that ends in D or K is going to have double O as the vowel. OE usually sounds like O. So you see this in words like toe or aloe. There are a couple exceptions to this. Words like poem, where the vowels are pronounced separately, so that's an irregular one. And then, O's got a lot of spellings. It's very tricky. OI pretty much always makes the oi sound, so that would be words like oil, spoil. A similar thing you can see with OY, so boy, royal. So only two combinations of letters make the oi sound. As for OW most of the time it makes ow, so that's words like now, how. There are a couple of exceptions to this, so slow and low, a couple other ones, those are irregular, but most of the time OW sounds like ow. Same deal for OU. So we have words like out, mouth. And the exceptions to that, there are only a couple. Those would be soup and group. And I think there are a couple more besides that, but most of the time OU makes the ow sound. And then last but not least, we have OR, which usually makes the sound. So you can see this in words like word or doctor. The only irregular one here would be just straight or, where OR sounds like or. And that pretty much takes care of the main spelling patterns of the letter O. Coming on to U. In most short words, it sounds like up, bug. It also sounds like in any word that has a double consonant, like summer or butter. It usually sounds like oo if it's by itself at the end of the word, like in flu. And it also sounds like oo if it comes with an E, like in the word glue or true. It sounds like oo again also if it has a silent E. For example, tune or prune. Terminal E's or final E's in English are almost always silent, so it's a good rule of thumb. If U comes at the front of a longer word, it usually sounds like U. So for example, university or union. There are only a handful of words that have UY, like buy and guy. But in those words, UY sounds like I. UR pretty much always makes the sound, like in turn or fur. There are a couple of words that have UI in them, and in those words it pretty much always sounds like I, such as build or quit. And then the only exception to that rule is a word like suit. So that one is irregular. So U is a little bit easier to learn than some of the other letters. And our last vowel is the letter Y, which only makes two main sounds in English. It's pretty straightforward. So the letter Y in short words pretty much always makes the I sound. So dry, fry, so on. If you have a word that has no other vowel except Y, the Y will make the I sound. And if the letter Y comes at the end of a longer word, it always makes the E sound, like empty or very. And that's pretty much it. There are a handful of words where Y makes the is sound, but they're rather infrequent, so I'm going to skip those. The only one I can think of off the top of my head is syzygy. Syzygy is irregular, and that's the only word I can think of where you have three Y's and they all make the is sound. And that takes care of the vowels. The consonants, fortunately, are pretty straightforward. So I'm just going to talk about some of the weirder consonant rules. So the letter G, make that a little neater. The letter G can make either the G sound or the J sound. So most of the time it makes the G sound, especially if it's at the beginning of a word or at the end of a word. So that would give us words like get, gun, log. So almost at least 90% of the time the letter G sounds like G. There are a couple of words where it sounds like J, and those words, example of that would be like giraffe, so, or gentle. And those you pretty much have to learn by heart. GH, at the end of the word it sounds like F, so you have words like enough, tough. The exceptions to that rule are words like through and dough. I believe that the OUGH combination is the most irregular combination of letters in English. It can make, I believe, 5 different sounds. So that one takes a little practice to sort out. And of course, if GH comes at the front of a word, the only example I can think of is ghost, so it just sounds like a regular G. And if it comes in the middle of a word, it usually makes the vowel long. So you can see this in words like light or way. So the GH will make the vowel long. PH sounds like F, so you have words like phone, dolphin, so that's pretty simple. Another wacky combination is TION, which pretty much always sounds like shun. So you have nation, action. ION usually sounds like in or un. You can see some words like onion or friction. No, that's TION. Well, I can't think of another example off the top of my head, but or union. There you go. There's another one. So it can sound like in or un depending on the word. MB, usually the B is silent. Tum, numb. Comb. Let's see. The combination CK at the end of the word always makes a short vowel. So you have words like rock, stick, back, truck, spec. So CK always makes the K sound and it always works with a short vowel. The letter C itself is pretty tricky. Most of the time it makes the same sound as K, especially if it's at the front of a word. And this is particularly true in words that have C and then either CL or CR. If you have like creed or clean. If C appears with another consonant, it sounds like K. DG is a combination that generally pretty much only found in the middle of words, and it sounds like J. So like edge, judge. QU appears, Q and U almost always appear together in English, and it makes the qua sound. So you have words like quit, question. We're almost done. SH pretty much always sounds like sh, shut, ship. CH sometimes sounds like sh, particularly if the word is from French. Most of the time, though, it sounds like ch, chin, chum. TCH also always makes the ch sound, so you can see that in words like watch or itch. Let's see. S. The letter S usually sounds like S, but if it comes after a vowel, it usually sounds like Z. So this is particularly true in words like trees, boys. So in words that end on a vowel sound, the S will sound like Z. There are a couple of words that have GN in it. In that case, the G is usually silent. So words like gnome, Gnostic, it's a little very bizarre, but same thing. In KN, the K is usually silent, so no, night. WH usually just sounds like W, so what, where. The only exception I can think of to this is who, where it makes an H sound. And I guess few more things before I wrap this up. There are a lot of words with a silent H, so silent H words be our, honor, honest. And of course, I know people from the British Isles are going to flip out that I left out the U there. That's the way we spell it on this side of the pond. The combination LE occurs at the end of many words. It just sounds like all. Little. Brittle. And a couple more general rules before I wrap this up. See, most of English spelling can be explained in about a 20-minute video, so it's not that bad. So there's the I before E rule. which is I before E except after C, or in sounding like A as in neighbor or way. So. And the other main useful spelling rule is that a double consonant makes a vowel short. So you can see this in words like cramming, clapping. So if you see any word where you have either a double M, a double P, double L, double G, that usually indicates a short vowel. And one last thing I want to touch on, one rule I forgot for the letter E. So going back to the letter E briefly, if the letter E also sounds like E if it comes at the beginning of a short word, like even, or evil, equal. So that's another common spelling pattern for the letter E. And those spelling patterns pretty much take care of about 95% of the English language. I hope this video was useful to you, and if you like it, comment, like it, spread it around. All of that would be good.